Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Contender profile for the Australian Open 2023 tournament, the first Grand Slam of the year. And as you should know, we're going to go over multiple players from the ATP and WTA side, and we're going to talk about them in detail, analysis of their game, how they have performed at the Australian Open in prior years, also how was their hardcourt form generally, and how does their game translate onto that surface, in addition to some recent form, and then ultimately my prediction and expectations from them at this slam. Before we get into it though, remember to that like button and do subscribe if you are new. Also do remember to leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. And thank you to all you members. Your support is greatly appreciated. Okay, let's get into this then. So Maria Sakkari is who we're going to talk about today. The Greek Energizer Bunny, I think, is probably the right way of putting it. She has an abundance of energy, the number 6 ranked player in the world, and 2022 was a up and down year. It really was. It was a year of some very high ups and some very high lows. She actually made 4 finals last year. So we'll talk about her 2022 season recent form first. So 4 finals, that is, in Palma, Indian Wells, St. Petersburg, and Guadalajara. 3 out of those 4 are on hardcourt, by the way, so worth noting that. She lost to Jessica Pegula, Maya Sharif on clay, which was the biggest upset. I think the Egyptian beating her, big win for her. Iga Swiatek in Indian Wells. I mean, no massive shame in that. She has been the dominant player of 2022. And then, of course, Anett Kontaveit, even in St. Petersburg in straight sets as well. So she hasn't been able to clinch as many titles as she would have liked. She's only won 1 career title, actually. That was in 2019 on clay. She seems to have a little bit of an issue in finals, but we won't go into that too much, but that's clearly a little bit of pressure that's telling in those matches, in those finals. And she also does tend to have some very long matches. And I imagine that even though she's arguably probably the fittest player on tour, it still does take something out of her when she gets to that final stage. In terms of also then her win percentage, so interestingly so her highest ranking, by the way, was in 2022. She was ranked number 3 at one stage. She kept her ranking, though, from 2021 to 2022 at number 6. But her win percentage dropped slightly from 65.5%, which is the highest of her career of matches, more than 10 matches anyway in a year. It dropped to 63.5%. Okay, you might say not a huge dip, but it's still a dip. However, what she has done really well at the start of this year is managed to step it up a little bit at the United Cup, which are the most recent results. So first of all, she beat Petra Martic, the Croatian player, in straight sets, then Victoria Tomova of Bulgaria, and then Elise Mertens, all 3 of these in straight sets, which was very impressive. Yes, they're not top players, they're not top 10 players, but still, you need to get those wins, and especially in these tournaments where, with very, let's say, boisterous and energetic and exuberant crowds cheering on their compatriots, it can get extremely tough at times to navigate your way through these matches. She did so very well, so I think showed a good mental strength in those. However, she did come undone against Martina Trevisan, losing 6-3, 6-7, 7-5. Now, that was a big shame, I think, for her, because she won the tiebreaker, fought back really nicely in the second set. Trevisan was playing some great tennis, the Italian, but then eventually lost 7-5 in a very tight 3-setter. She's still pretty young. She's 29 at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. Or 27, sorry, even, excuse me. Sorry, Maria Sakkari. She is a extremely interesting player in terms of her style, and we'll talk about that very shortly. Before I do that, I just want to round up her recent form And of course, the tournament before the United Cup was the WTA finals in Fort Worth. And she ended up making the semi-finals there. She beat Pagula, who she just lost to actually the week before, a couple of weeks before, in the final of Guadalajara. So that was, to me, was a very impressive victory, and 2 tiebreakers as well. So very, very close match, 8-6 and 7-4 in those 2 tiebreakers as well. So that to me was a big win. Then beat Sabalenka, who actually went on to beat Swiatek in the semi-finals as well. That to me was a great win. And then Ons Jabeur, who's arguably been the second best player in 2022, beat her in straight sets as well. So some really good wins there. Lost to Caroline Garcia in the end in straights, but there's some really good wins at that tournament. So that, I think, bodes well. She also, as I said, made the final of Guadalajara prior to that. And so look, I think she's coming into this in some pretty good form, which is a plus if you're a Maria Sakkari fan or a Greek fan, I guess, as well, because she will be flying the flag as the primary threat from Greece on the WTA side. Of course, Stefanos Tsitsipas will be flying the flag from the ATP side alongside a couple of other players, I think. For Maria Sakkari, I'm not quite sure if she's going to be the only one from Greece, but she's definitely the top player from the country. In terms of then her form at the Australian Open, before we get on to her game style or play style and then how it translates onto this surface, the Australian Open hasn't been a particularly good tournament for her. She's never made it past the 4th round, and she's played every year since 2016. 2nd round, 3rd round, 1st round, 3rd round, 4th round, 1st round, 4th round are her results at the Australian Open. So, good to see that she's obviously made the main draw every single year, but also disappointing that she hasn't gone further, I think, is probably the feeling that she has on that as well. In terms of, would we have expected her to have gone further? On the WTA side and WTA Tour, it's so tough, personally, I think, for players to have that type of consistency that we see maybe and have seen with, say, the big 3 or Serena on the WTA Tour. So it's almost non-existent, and we've seen it a little bit with Swiatek last year, but it's not a common thing, and that's what the top 10 tends to be, a little bit of a revolving door almost as well. And I don't think that's necessarily because the quality is low. I actually think it's the opposite. I think it's because there's a large group of players where their ability is pretty similar, and it's a high quality, high volume field, which then ends up meaning that it's extremely competitive and anyone can almost beat anyone. She actually lost to Jessica Pegula, by the way, last year at the Australian Open, 7-6, 6-3. So that's clearly a real nemesis that she has, Jessica Pegula. They played each other quite a few times, and I'm wondering whether they'll play each other again at the Australian Open, which would be really interesting to see, considering they played each other recently as well. The head-to-head is 4-2 actually in favor of Maria Sakkari, interestingly. But of the last four meetings, and that first meeting of the 4 being at the Australian Open last year, it's 2-2. So very interesting, very, very interesting. All on hard court as well. All on hard court. In terms of her results on other surfaces, well, she's best at, I would say, the French Open. Roland Garros is probably her best bet. She made the semi-finals in 2021, but was very, very close to making the final there. Also in the semi-final in 2021 of the US Open, but some really poor results at the Slams last year. 2nd round of the French, 3rd at Wimbledon, and 2nd at the US Open. But I would say the French Open, US Open particularly are slightly better for a game. And the reason for that is because she has as I said, a very energetic game. She's extremely good defensively. She's able to move around the court with, lightning quick precision at times. And her movement is very, very good. She doesn't have, incredible power from the back of the court. She has substantial power, but it's not, one-hit winner wonders from her. We don't see that very often. We don't see hammer blows from her. And you won't see a high proportion of winners per match. You also won't see, though, a high proportion of unforced errors, hopefully, from her each match as well. Well, hopefully is what her team will be hoping for. But what she does is grind you down, but doesn't. She's not a pusher. She's not someone who pushes it but from the back of the court and grinds you down with moonball. She's someone who grinds you down with really well struck ground strokes from the back of the court, finds really good angles, high top spin, drags you out, looks to open up space and then hit into that open space, and is looking to make you feel uncomfortable, I think, is the biggest thing about her game. And she's so energetic that she frustrates opponents as well. She has that in her locker as well. So that then bodes quite well, of course, for Roland Garros and the US Open, where the courts are a bit slower than Wimbledon and Australia, which is probably why she's made 2 semi-finals in those two tournaments and hasn't got past the 4th round at Australia or at Wimbledon as well. Her serve as well, not necessarily, she's not serving down rockets. She has a pretty solid first serve, I would say, and manages to hit her spots pretty well. Second serve is attackable, and I think that's something to look out for at the Australian Open, especially. She, like a lot of the girls on the WTA tour, they struggle to hit really good kick serves, if at all, and that does end up opening up big time. I think she'll need to hit a high percentage of first serves if she is to really make a real run at the Australian Open and try and challenge for the title. The Australian Open court's extremely quick, of course, so her defensive skills will need to definitely be used, but I think she'll probably need to flatten her ground strokes a little bit as well, because if I was her, I would say to myself, I have the ability to defensively get myself out of trouble at times, which is great, but really, if I want to get the most out of my game on this fast, hard court, maybe I need to flatten my forehand and backhand a little bit, just a little bit on both sides, and maybe also go line quicker than I normally would. I think at times she gets caught in the cross court exchanges, and I think if she goes line earlier, she might lose some points because of it, but I think she'll win a high proportion of points by playing some more ambitious tennis, maybe. That's not to say she doesn't normally play ambitious tennis, but maybe slightly higher risk tennis than she's used to. But she has that ability to do it. And as we saw at the United Cup and as we saw at Fort Worth, she's able to beat the top players on hard court. So that bodes really, really well. I also have seen a slight change in her in terms of coming forward to the net. Now, she's not someone who's going to charge the net, of course, and I don't really expect her to ever be that type of person, but she is someone who continually, I think, surprises me in terms of the way that she is looking to improve her game. She's not someone who's happy to just stand still and say, I'm happy with how I am. I heard her recently say that she wants to be world number 1 in the world. The only way for her to do that, of course, is to improve, is to become innovative. And I think, part of that will be coming forward and trying to be a bit more ambitious in the way that she plays. Now, she's not the most natural volleyers, and I'm not saying that she's suddenly going to start, charging the net like others might, but that's not to say that she's not able to do so. I think she could be a bit better at the net. She's got the legs in terms of the ability to move around the court and transition well. So if she's then able to come forward nicely, put in a really, really good position. So let's see if she's able to add that and also maybe back herself at times. She's a player that, she, in my opinion, like her return as well is also pretty solid. I'd say it's probably better than her serve in terms of ability-wise. It's an interesting one in the sense that she doesn't have huge weapons like Sabalenka, and she also isn't a pure grinder like some of the other players on tour as well. Like, say, I don't know, if we're talking about grinders, I mean, there's a few that you might say are grinders. I mean, I think Elise Mertens a little bit of a grinder. You might say she's played her recently. People that are looking to induce errors from their opponents rather than actually try and hit through the court. I have a feeling that she's going to come into this, in pretty good form. There's a little bit of disappointment, of course, after the United Cup loss, but she should surely brush that under the rug and just think, you know what, it's fine. It happens. No need to really worry about that too much. If I was her, I would be taking this as a really good opportunity. She only made the fourth round last year. So, yeah, she does have some points, that she could potentially defend. But if I was her, I would be thinking, look, no one's really, I don't personally think there's anyone out there generally expecting her to go super deep at this tournament. I've picked her because I know what she's about. I know her ability, and also I know her recent form. I've also seen her notable wins as of late, and I think she's probably primed at 27 now to start making some big moves. And she's made 2 semi-finals at 2 of the slams. What's to say she can't then suddenly go deep as well now at the Australian Open? I don't think it would be suddenly. I think it would be a natural progression for her generally. So, or genuinely even. So what are my expectations of her then, I guess, is the real question, because we talked a little bit about her game, and I think, her return game translates quite well onto the fast hard courts. Her serve, I mean, if she picks her spots, then she will be able to get more free points, even though she's a little bit underpowered maybe on her serve. The second serve, there's not really too much she can do with that. She is going to struggle at times to win a high percentage of points on her second serve. And I think that's just, unfortunately, what she's going to have to deal with at the moment until she really kind of improves that side of her game. But that's the same for a lot of the women on tour, as I said previously. So in terms of her expectations and in terms of where I think she should be going, of course, the draw plays a massive factor, as I will say in all these videos, and it really does. But it's also nice to have a think about where she should be aiming for. And I think for her, she will be aiming for, say, a semi-final. I think she'll be thinking, look, I've made the semi-finals at Roland Garros and at the US Open, both in the same year in 2021. Now, in 2022, I didn't have a particularly good year, even at the slams. However, she made 4 finals. Yes, she lost them, but it shows she has the ability to go deep and also beat top players, also shown by the WTA finals and also Guadalajara as recent tournaments. She'll be telling herself, I can go deep. I've also played in Australia at the United Cup recently, so that will help. I think she'll be thinking, I should be going deep. I should be making at least the semi-finals. And the fact that she's talking about being number one at 6, at ranking number 6, that indicates that she should be making the quarterfinals. Right, that's kind of her route if the draw was to play out as it should, which it never does. So quarterfinals, I think, is a minimum. I think she'll be expecting at least a semi-finals. That'll be kind of her aim, to at least get to that stage. For me, my expectations are maybe a quarterfinal. I think a quarterfinal is probably quite realistic. There's a lot of players on tour at the moment who I probably fancy a little bit more than her to win the title. There are some question marks around, say, Swiatek and injury, but Swiatek, of course, is going to be the favorite going into it. Then you've got Sabalenka, who's been in some good form recently. Caroline Garcia has been very good over the past year. Ons Jabeur has been very good over the past year. She's coming off 2 Grand Slam finals as well, so she'll be looking to go one step further. Pegula's played really well recently, especially with America as well. So there are a lot of players out there who will be looking to win the title and are coming into this in arguably maybe not necessarily better form, better immediate form, but better form over the past year. I think that does also make a difference as well. But we'll see. She is an extremely dangerous player, Maria Sakkari, and I do think I wouldn't be surprised to see her make the semi-finals, genuinely. I think we've seen the draw open up lots of times on the WTA side, and it could also happen. There's a lot of dangerous players who are not seeded particularly highly. So we shall see. But let me know your thoughts below. Who do you think, or where do you think, even Maria Sakkari will finish? What's going to be her expected result at the Australian Open? What do you expect her to do? Is she a contender? Could she win the Australian Open? Let me know your thoughts below, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.